What's up, guys? Welcome to the Simply Soccer podcast. I'm excited for you to be here, and I'm excited to create this podcast for you. Last weekend, we went over how to basically set up your own 30-day challenge, the importance of 30-day challenges. I also linked you to an article that is going to help you with not only setting up your 30-day challenges, but setting them up in a way that doesn't allow you to give up on them early. Because like I said in that podcast, one of the biggest reasons people don't get results from challenges, 30-day challenges, is because they don't set them up right or they don't commit to them. And essentially that article is going over how to set it up in a way that sets you up for success instead of failure. Okay, so I'm not going to go any more into that simply because you can go listen to the last podcast to get that. And I will be making a video on the topic at some point. I've got so many videos to make though, guys. I have so many plans, so many projects I'm working on at the moment that I don't know exactly when every video is going to come out. Speaking of videos I've done recently, I would love it if you haven't already to go check out the video I made yesterday. It's a video I put a lot of work into, and I really think you're going to love it. It's on how to shoot a soccer ball with power, except that we actually go over certain techniques. I've given a solution to all of you people who kept telling me, all of you players who kept telling me that you have big feet and that's been preventing you from shooting well. I addressed that. And I also show you that there are actually more than one technique that you can use to shoot with power, and there's actually some subtle differences between each technique. So you can take a look at the variety of techniques I've shown you. It's actually a very quick video on the topic, but it's very powerful. Another video I would have you check out after this podcast is the top five soccer moves to help you quickly turn your opponent. Another very useful video with a bunch of moves that if you have these in your repertoire and you get really good at it, and you also get really good with your awareness and your control, it's going to be almost impossible to take the ball off you. And trust me, I've met players who use really simple moves and their great awareness to keep the ball from players. And I've seen players go through whole games without losing the ball, even in tight spaces, because they've had this ability. All right, so enough about things that have been going on and videos I've already created. Let's really get into this podcast. And I want to go over something that I've been reading a lot about lately and something I've been doing, and it's been just absolutely amazing in my own life. I think it will help you too. And we're going to go over what this is, how to start doing it, and all that. So what I'm going to talk to you about is overcoming resistance. So what resistance essentially is, it's like your ego. When you know you have to do something, but you don't do it. You have that feeling in the pit of your stomach, or maybe it's in your head. You get this heavy feeling and you just don't want to follow through on whatever it is. Now, we've talked about similar things to this, but this is going to be a little bit different. So, I've discussed how, if you want to go to the gym, but you don't, or you have work to do and you don't. So that's essentially what resistance is, but we're going to go over exactly why this happens, what it is, how to overcome it, or at least how to live with it and be okay with it and get through it each day, and other things like that. We're also going to, if we have time, discuss another idea, which I am going to make a quick tip video on, which you've probably been seeing on the channel, where basically I almost do it in like a vlog style, kind of more personable video style, where I go over a mindset with you guys that I think will help you further your ability as a soccer player or just a person in general. So, resistance. I've been reading a book. In fact, I've already read it. And now that I've already read it, I feel like I've already mentioned it to you guys. I did. I mentioned it to you guys last week, but I want to go into it a little more. And the book was The Art of... now I can't think of the title and the book's inside. So it's what is it? Something Art. The War of Art. That's it. The War of Art by Steven Pressfield. First off, if you have not gotten this book, get it. Not only is it a very quick read, a very small book, it is basically going to be a guide you can use for the rest of your life whenever you're feeling like you're putting things off or need to overcome resistance. Seriously, I've already read it once. I'm halfway through it again. I only bought it like a week or two ago. I've not had it long. It's such a great book. But what he goes over is his journey of overcoming resistance, what he's learned about resistance. He goes over why most people don't overcome it, why most people succumb to resistance, and it gives you some strategies in order to get by it, right? So some of those I'm going to be sharing with you today. So let's go over some common resistances that you may have. Since the demographic of this video will be mainly footballers, here are some of the common resistances I've seen in my life when it comes to football, and things that affect my ability as a footballer, and some resistances that have come up outside of football. Let's go over football first. So first and foremost, what would be the number one resistance is probably for players to be practicing as much as they should. We all know that practice makes perfect. We all know that the more you practice, the higher quality your practice is. So doing deliberate practice and doing that on a consistent basis is what's going to actually get you to that next level. It's what's actually going to help you improve. So if you're not doing that, if you have resistance to doing that, it's affecting you in a big way, right? So you want to overcome that resistance. Another one may be working out. So working out without ball. So this could be fitness, cardio, anaerobic exercises, interval training. This could be, speed training, lifting weights, weight training, foundation training, maximal strength training, plyometrics. This could be anything that has to do with fitness. This could even be for someone who's listening who isn't really that serious about football, plays it, but does want to get in shape and feel healthy. A lot of people have resistance to fitness. Another one for footballers is a resistance, and this is a big one for me, or was a big one for me. I've gotten a lot better at it now, but recovery. The discipline to overcome the resistance that you feel when you know you should be stretching, when you know you should be taking that cold shower or ice bath or get that massage or use that foam roller or go for that recovery run, that resistance you feel when you know you should be doing that and don't do it. That's another huge resistance. That's one of my biggest ones, actually, that I've had throughout my life. I used to never stretch after matches, after practices, and I paid the price. As many of you know, I had a very serious injury in college due to my back, and the reason that happened is because I had so many tight muscles that it just a lot of stress in that area, and eventually one day it just popped, and that injury kept me out for 8 months, and it's an injury that still affects me to my day. In fact, as I'm walking right now, I am very aware of my back because there's a slight pain in it, and now I have to really stay on top of my stretching to alleviate the pain and make sure I don't re-injure it. So overcoming the resistance of recovery is another one that footballers go through. Overcoming other obstacles, other resistances. Maybe it's the resistance of eating healthy. This is another big one. And this one is a little harder, actually. This is probably one of the bigger ones because in some of the food we eat today, they're deliberately putting things in them that cause you to become addicted to them, cause you to want to continue eating them. There's certain chemicals and certain just products in there that make you want more of it. So when you eat like junk food, for example, like cookies and sugar-based foods and, just really, bad foods, these companies know what they're doing. They put stuff in those foods that they know you will become addicted to. It activates the same kind of center of your brain that gets activated when you take cocaine or another drug of that nature. And so this one I can understand is very hard to overcome, but you can overcome it. So there's resistance towards healthy eating, and it's not just about avoiding junk, it's actually disciplining yourself and overcoming the resistance to eat at certain times, to eat the certain things, to track what you eat. You have to overcome resistance. So obviously going over all these things and being, a decent amount into this podcast already, 10 minutes, we can basically come to the conclusion that resistance holds us back and is something that needs to be addressed. When I say the word resistance, it's such a simple word, so straightforward that you think, okay, this is not that big a deal. When in reality, this is something that if you could start on a daily basis overcoming your resistances, you will start to make strides, that you wouldn't even believe. If every time a resistance popped up, but you were completely aware of it and you knew how to combat it and you knew how to face it head on and overcome it, or at least fight it, you will start to see improvements. One of the things that I've learned very recently, or at least I've already known what it is, but what I've actually felt recently and actually experienced recently, because things are different, from just hearing about them, hearing the idea, and being knowledgeable about them, and actually feeling them. And what that was is how you feel right now, the current state you're in right now, how you feel, how your body feels, how your mentality is, how, maybe your emotion you have right now isn't permanent. And I think one of the things that keeps us in resistance is thinking we're always going to feel a certain way, when in reality, you can change moment to moment. It's one of the biggest obstacles and resistances I feel for people who are trying to come out of depression, people who are trying to consistently be positive, for example, or consistently be happy, or consistently, be someone who is on the positive spectrum of emotions, who is energetic and enthusiastic and all that. It's this thought that I'm always going to, for some reason, go back to my default, which is either sadness or hopelessness or anything like that. So one of the biggest things I've learned recently and started feeling, because these days I'm very happy most of the time, usually energetic, and that's my default. And what I'm learning is, what I'm feeling right now isn't necessarily what I'm going to be feeling an hour from now, a day, a week, a month. So recognize when you're feeling a resistance, it's not always going to be that way. So when you're feeling that resistance to working out, you think that you're always going to be feeling this incredibly strong resistance to working out, but that's not the case. Because the more you fight that resistance, the weaker it gets. Same with, your resistance to eating healthy food, or resistance to not being able to resist, using resistance in a positive way this time, junky food. That because you feel so much resistance to it now, and this is just an example, this is not saying everyone listening to this has this issue with this particular thing, but insert whatever you have a lot of resistance towards, right? So maybe it's working out, eating healthy, maybe it's practicing every day, maybe it's doing some stretches, whatever it is, maybe it's being consistent, doing the 30-day challenge. I don't know what it is for you. But because you feel something so strongly right now, you project into the future and think that you're also going to feel that same level of resistance in the future. And I'm telling you, you won't, And if you work at it, that is, right? I mean, if you keep eating the junk, you keep avoiding eating healthy and all this, you're going to just reinforce that resistance. You're just going to power it up almost. But just recognize the more you don't give into that resistance, the more you fight it, the more you learn how to fight it, right? You learn how to deal with it when it comes up. You learn how to consciously identify it. Because one of the biggest things that comes, or one of the biggest ways to overcome resistance is recognize when you're in resistance. Because sometimes your ego will be very clever and try and justify your resistance and paint it in a way that to you makes it seem like you're not in resistance, and in fact you would be doing the right thing by doing the thing your ego's telling you. So by fighting resistance on a day-to-day basis, you start to become accustomed, where you start to recognize resistance and be able to deal with it. Now, the good thing about resistance is also, and they go over this in the War Bar, or Stephen Pressfield does, is resistance is an indicator of what you actually need to do. So if you're really scared of something or in resistance to something, it probably means that you need to do that thing, right? So if you're really in resistance to working out, it probably means you need to work out. Typically, what we're most scared of, fearful of, or in resistance of is what we need to do the most. It's what we need to prioritize. Now, this is not always the case, so don't put things in the comments that go, well, what about this? But no, typically, the thing we are in most resistance to is the thing that we need to do. For example, have you ever had to talk to someone about something and you needed to talk to them about this thing and you've been putting it off and it's just been getting worse, you've been getting more resistant to doing it, but you knew you should do it, right? You knew you should do it, but you kept putting it off. You were in resistance. There you go. It's an indicator that you need to be doing that. Let's say you've been putting off working out and you're in huge resistance to that. Again, an indicator. It's basically pointing you in a direction. You ever found that when you chase things that you love or follow things that you love, that you're in more resistance? Your resistance is almost telling you, go after this. You're going to have to step into fear. You're going to have to step into this. But once you do, the magical thing about when you actually step into resistance and you overcome the resistance and you fight it, is you recognize there was nothing to be fearful of after all. For most of the time. And how I like to describe this is Will Smith tells a story of when he went skydiving, and he talks about fear And if I can find the clip, I will put it in the description for you. But let me just tell you it briefly. And he goes to this audience and says, you know, skydiving is a very interesting confront with fear. And, you know, and I'll just skip to like basically the story. And he goes like, you're in bed like the night before and you're sweating and you're having bad dreams and you're like, oh, you know, waking up scared. You know, you wake up for breakfast and you're scared and you're fearful and you're in resistance to going skydiving. And he mentions that the reason they went through with it is because all of his friends were like, yeah, let's do it. But in reality, all of them were scared to do it, but they didn't want the other people to know they were scared. Right? So throughout the whole day, they're terrified, they're terrified, they're terrified. They get on the plane, they're terrified, they're in fear, they're in resistance, they're terrified. They get up to the right altitude, still terrified, terrified. They're not there, the doors open of the plane, still terrified. Will starts watching his friends go first, and they're going out and out and out, terrified, terrified, terrified. Then he says it's his turn. And he says he's so scared, he's terrified, he's in so much fear and so much resistance. And then they jump out because he's attached to someone on the first jump. And he says, the moment that I jumped out of that plane, the moment I was off the plane, it was pure bliss. Interesting insight, isn't that? So what he's saying is that the moment he jumped from the plane, the fear dissipated, it disappeared. And how he described this was, and what he said is, so if when I actually confronted my fear, the actual action that I was afraid of, that's completely blissful. Why did I need all that fear leading up to it, leading up to the jump? Why did I need to let that into my life? Why did I need to be affected so much by that fear? When in reality, it was one of the most blissful experiences of my life. And this is, you can relate this to any fear that you have. When you're actually confronting and doing the thing you're fearful of, you recognize there was nothing to be afraid of. And again, there can obviously be some examples where this is not the case, but this is for most of the case. And what Will said really got to me, because I looked at situations in my own life where I was so scared of something, right? So fearful, so in resistance to certain things. And then I actually went through and did them. And after I did them, recognized, wait a second, that wasn't scary at all. In fact, it felt really good. Here's another way for all of you guys out there, ever really, really, you know, loved a girl or liked a girl or had a crush on a girl, you were probably very scared to talk to her or go up to her. I know I was when I was in school. I still get this feeling sometimes today. You're really scared, right? And again, this is an indication by resistance that you should actually go talk to her. You should go actually do it, right? And yeah, maybe you'll get rejected, maybe you won't, maybe something bad will happen. But the thing you'll notice is after it, for the most part, you'll be like, I feel better. Because you're letting go of that resistance, you're overcoming it. And this could be the same for girls to guys. You know, if a girl gets asked out or does ask a guy out or whatever, the same thing. So what is it you're in most resistance to? What is it you know you should do, but you're not? And again, we can relate this to soccer, we can relate this to normal day life. And I would really, whenever you're in resistance, try to think of the Will Smith story that I just told you, where he was in fear for like 24 hours before he jumped out of the plane. And in the moment he jumped off, he was in pure bliss. So the action he was afraid of, which was jumping out of the plane, when he was actually involved in that action, when he was in the midst of that action, he was in bliss. It's something to think about, isn't it? The fear was a mind construct. The fear was the ego saying that this won't be safe, saying that this will be scary, saying that this is not something that's good. Yet when he was in it, he was in pure bliss. He'd overcome resistance. So think about that next time you're in resistance. And this isn't to say that you'll always be able to overcome it. I don't. There are days I don't. There are days I succumb to it. But the thing is to recognize that and to always say and always tell yourself that I'm going to get to the next one, or I'm not going to give up. So what Stephen Pressfield talks about a lot is a lot of us are in resistance to our work. And he says the difference between good writers and great writers is a good writer thinks writing is, the hard part about writing is writing. Or it's something like this. I'm going to butcher this, but Stephen Pressfield said the pros know that writing isn't about knowing how to write. Knowing how to write's the easy part. It's actually getting started that's hard. So What are you in resistance to? Is it working out? Is it getting out there every day? You know, what is it in your soul, in your gut? You know you should be doing, but you're in resistance to. Now, if you really want to overcome this, if you really want to start beating resistance on a day-to-day basis, I highly recommend you pick up the book, The War of Art by Steven Pressfield. I'm not affiliated or anything to this book, so I have nothing to gain by telling you to buy this. So hopefully you know I'm being genuine when I say this. I'm just recommending it because it's had an impact. I've only had it for like a week or two, and it's already had a really great impact on my life. So that's resistance, overcoming resistance. And this is a day-to-day thing. Like this is something you do every day, but you start getting good at overcoming resistance. You start creating the habit of overcoming resistance. Because the fact of the matter is, it will always be there. The resistance is always going to be there. The fear is always going to be there. You know, fear, you don't learn to get rid of fear. You just learn how to operate even when there is fear. You learn how to reframe fear. You know, instead of thinking this is scary, you think, oh, this is going to be a learning experience. Another thing Will Smith said is, let me see if I can remember what he said. He said, don't live, I think he said actually, don't live for money, live for experience. I think what he was saying is don't live in fear, essentially. Oh yeah, he said, don't live for safety, live for experience. And safety is what your fear and resistance want you to live in. You know, being in your little box and never getting hurt and all of this stuff, never doing things that would expand your comfort zone. But you have to realize that your ego isn't really concerned about your bodily well-being. I mean, it is, but it's also concerned about if your feelings get hurt, or, you know, if like you step outside your comfort zone. Stepping outside your comfort zone, as far as your ego is concerned, is death, but you need to step outside it to grow, right? So that's something to keep in mind. Definitely get the book, Overcome The War of Art, if you're interested in this. Again, it's something I'm going to be reading over and over again. I'm going to take it everywhere I go when I travel, because I'm going to be traveling at some point soon. When I do that, this will be the first book I put in my luggage, just because I can, you know, I want to memorize this book. It's so good. So there you go. There's that book. All right, guys, so that's resistance. Let me know in the comments, what is it you're in resistance to, and how you're going to overcome it. You know, and I'll be in there. I'll help you out. You know, I'll try and help you as much as I can in the comments, okay? Sometimes it takes me a little longer to answer comments because I get a lot of them, not just from the daily video, but videos in the past. So, but I will try and help you as much as possible. Next, let's see how we're doing on time here. 22 minutes. Okay, so next is I want to go over something that I am going to make a little kind of personal video on as well, but I want to go over it here so I can explain it in a little more detail. We'll do like 10 minutes on this or so. And it has to do with habits again, but I want to give you a different perspective when it comes to your habits, because I think a lot of people get intimidated by developing these habits, new habits, because they see the habit and you're like, so like if I tell you meditate, if I tell you, for example, that I usually meditate an hour every day, you look at that and go, that's nuts. I can't do that. You know, that's crazy. A whole hour? But what you don't understand is I didn't start in an hour. You know, I've been meditating on and off for years at varying degrees. Meaning some days 10, some I started maybe at 5, worked my way up to 30, then 40, then an hour, right? It didn't just go from 0 to 100. Again, when you see someone in the gym who's ripped and in fantastic shape, he didn't just get there in 30 days. He's put years into that. So recognize that first. But the idea I want to go over is that the habit, listen and really listen to this, this is important. The habit is more important than the intensity at first. In the Power of Repetition video, I mentioned and showed a clip of Simon Sinek going over that consistency is more important than intensity. And his example he used was, if you go to the gym and just work out for 9 hours, you're not going to get any stronger. But if you go to the gym for 20 minutes every day, you will absolutely get in shape. And what he was saying is consistency is more important than intensity. You know, you want both. You want intensity and consistency in a balanced way, in a way that some of your workouts will be more intense. Maybe some days my meditation is quote unquote more intense. I mean, meditation is usually not intense, but where I'm doing it longer, I'm spending more time on it. So some days maybe I'll do that. But the fact of the matter is, when you are developing the habit, you can start off small. So the habit is more important than the intensity. As long as you are doing something towards that habit every day, you are winning the battle. So let's say, for example, meditation is something you want to develop, a habit. Start with 5 minutes a day. You can do 5 minutes a day, right? You don't have to worry about if you're doing it right or all this. Just do 5 minutes a day, because you're not too worried about how well you're doing it at first, or if you're doing it perfectly, because you'll learn as you go. And this includes any habit you're trying to develop. What you're focused on is doing it and getting your brain used to doing it every single day, because after a while of doing it every single day, your brain's going to be like, oh, this is automatic. I'm just going to do it. And then you can ramp up that intensity. This is why I recommend playing every day. When I first started my channel, I recommended new players just to go outside and juggle for 10 minutes every day, and to do that consistently. Now, I didn't recommend that because I think you're going to become an amazing player just through juggling. I recommended that to get them into the habit of playing every day. Because once you're in the habit of playing every day, then suddenly you go from juggling to doing a few dribbling drills, and you go from looking at fitness, and you look at all these things, and you already have developed that habit of playing every day, the general habit of playing every day, so you can then pivot from there. You can then increase from there. You can then progress from there. It doesn't have to be difficult. We don't have to overcomplicate these things. Most things are simple. Maybe not easy, but simple. Maintaining consistency, I understand, is not easy, especially if you've lived up until this point a life of non-consistency, where things weren't consistent, or the things you wanted to be consistent were not. And I was like that for the longest time, to where I sometimes struggle with it today. But I've gotten to a point where I'm really consistent with things. I have, standards that I like to keep. I have things I do on a daily basis that I rarely miss, to the point where I can't remember the last time I missed them, because I prioritize them and make sure I do them. But I didn't get to that point by biting off more than I can chew, or doing it too intensely. We get all motivated by rah-rah speeches. We get all motivated by these results other people are having. Like, we look at top entrepreneurs and top players, and we think, I want to be like that, so I'm going to go out and practice for 5 hours every day, not realizing that we can't do that. Not realizing that it took them a long time of consistent work to get to where they are. And they didn't do it by doing everything at once. They worked their way up. You need to be progressive. And you need to remember the habit, the actual general habit, is more important than the intensity at first, right? So if you're trying to get in shape, you can start out by running 10 minutes a day, and just start out with jogging, maybe a few sprints, maybe you run a few hills. And you consistently do that. Then, when that's getting a little easy and you're starting to develop the habit, you ramp it up, you amp it up a little bit. Yeah? And then after that, you start looking at more fitness stuff and go, how can I'm feeling, a little lackluster in this area, or I'm feeling that I'm not strong enough in this area, how can I do that? And all while you're doing this, you're developing the habit. And you're not biting off more than you can chew. You're keeping it right to where you can handle it and not get discouraged. And again, you can increase the intensity later once you develop the habit. If you're 100 days into working out, you can increase the intensity without it getting to a point where you give up, because your body is now so used to working out, where you've gone over 3 months of it. Ooh, there's a deer. Sorry, just a deer walked into my yard. And it's looking right at me, and it's like, ooh, it's a SimplySoccer podcast. Can I be in it? Sure you can, dear. Come on over. He's walking away. You don't want to? Okay. But if you work out for 100 days, say you do cardio, and you do different kinds of cardio, and you just stick to 10 to 30 minutes every day, and you commit to it, and you don't make it too hard, you keep it simple, because you recognize you want to develop the habit, and then you'll get to the intensity. When those 100 days are up, as long as you stick with it and you're consistent, you will have developed the habit for the most part, and then you can increase the intensity. But the important thing is developing the habit, because you are rewiring your brain. You see, if you try and do an hour every day, having never worked out before, your brain is going to do it, and your ego is going to do it, and mind is going to do everything it can to make you stop, and it's probably going to win unless you're an incredibly disciplined person. And to become an incredibly disciplined person, you have to have been disciplined for a long time. So recognize that when you're developing your habits, or trying to, one of the reasons you might be giving up is because you're doing it too intensely at first. Again, I'm not trying to discourage you from making more intense workouts. I'm not trying to discourage you from doing more work. But I'm at a point right now where I'm doing a lot of work every single day. But it took me forever to get to this point, years, to get to the point where I'm as productive as I am now. And this has only happened recently. You know, I've learned through the years methods to help keep my energy up, diet that helps. I've learned, you know, the importance of certain things that help me to stick with certain things. Like, it's all encompassing, you know, it's all things filter into other things, but these are things I've developed over a long period of time. And it's not perfect either. There are still setbacks I have. There are still times when I fall off. You know, there are times where I might have a bad day or even a bad week. In the past, even longer times. But you have to just recognize that you cannot get there overnight. And if you try to get there overnight, you're just going to trip yourself up. All right, so with your habits, start off light, you know, and really monitor yourself and really consider when you're ready to make it more intense. But if you're missing days, if you are not following through, you need to make it less intense, because it probably means that you are starting off with too much and you're not able to stick with it. So set it up in a way so you can stick with it at first and then increase the intensity. All right, guys, so I think I'm going to leave it there. I really want you to make sure you go see those videos, like the power shot video and the, what was the other one? The moves to turn video. Make sure you go check those out. And also leave your questions down below. What topics do you want covered? What questions do you have for me? We're going to put hashtag resistance. So if you've listened all the way to the end, put hashtag resistance along with your question or comment. Even if you don't have a question or comment, just put that down there so I can identify who's listened all the way. That always helps me out immensely. And I like seeing who's committed to their growth and learning new ideas. You know, I like to surround my people with people like that. And also, I want to answer the questions of the people who have listened all the way, who are committed to listening, because I understand someone could just come on here for 2 minutes and then ask a question, which I'm not opposed to answering, but if you are listening all the way, I'm much more inclined to answer your question over theirs, if that makes sense. So put that hashtag in there with your question, comment, or if you have no question or comment, just put it in there to show me you listened. Please like this podcast, share it, check out the videos I have linked in the description. I'm also going to leave a link to the book I recommended, The War of Art, so you can go check that out. But check the description in most of my stuff, guys, because usually I put helpful either extra tips in there or links to videos and articles and things that are going to help you out even more. So check that stuff out. All right, guys, I want to thank you for tuning in to this podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. You know, I'm actually thinking about having a few guests on podcasts in the future. I'm just working some details out to do that, but look out for that in the future. I don't know how long it will take me to do that, but that is something I am working towards. I know some of you have asked me if I'll be doing that, so I will be working towards that. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in. Make sure you put the hashtag in there, and I will see you tomorrow for tomorrow's video.